Hello, good afternoon to all of you who listen to us from Europe. Good morning if you do it from the other side of the Atlantic. I am Philip Lardy, CEO of Open Expo and collaborator in Beyond Innovation podcast. Today, I received Devrup Mitra. It's his Regional Counsel Open Source Intellectual Property Group in Hewlett Packard Enterprise. How are you, Devrup?
Doing very well, thank you. How have you been, Philip?
Yes, it's fine. Thank you to be here with us today. So today, Devrup has come to tell us about open source legal consideration for startups. And just remember that you can ask a question directly through YouTube, through Twitter, or through Facebook, because right now we are sharing this broadcast through these three platforms. So you can ask questions, and at the end of this interview, I will ask directly the question to Drew. So thank you very much, and we will start in a few seconds with the first question, with my first question, Drew. Okay?
Yes, please.
Okay, so first question, why is open source software popular with startups?
Okay. So I think with startups, I think one of the reasons why open source is popular is because one, open source is out there and it's out there for consumption without paying a royalty or a fee to the person who owns it. And second, I think it's also tied to the costing and the budget of the startup, because startups operate in a typical shoestring budget. So I think it makes all the more sense for them to leverage open source in their code, because that way they're not only saving time, they're saving revenue as well. So also I think the third benefit for a startup is that they using a ready-made code, they can scale faster, and I think their go-to-market, they can meet their go-to-market strategy as soon as possible. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's really, really popular with startups.
And have you got, for example, some facts or key facts on the difference between startups and big companies in the time to market in new project or innovative project through open source?
Yeah, I think with big companies it is easier, because I think their level of maturity in terms of handling open source is much better than as opposed to a startup. Because when as opposed to a startup, when a startup wants to scale their business or scale their solution, I think they don't have the luxury of having a program office that specifically deals with open source. So I think they lack that knowledge and know-how. So yeah, I think that's one of the key differences, having a program office and not having a program office. So with startups not having a program office, they are unable to leverage that advantage.
So I know that today's interview is not about OSPO, but can you talk a little bit about open source program office for the folks that don't know it or don't know it very well, just to know why a company has a OSPO and what kind of company needs to have an OSPO inside their structure.
Right. Then I think like any organization that's fairly big and has a very, very large portfolio of product solutions and services, and has maybe immersed itself in various industries and operates at a very, very large scale. So, and I think these kind of companies would typically have an OSPO structure in place. So an OSPO structure generally is comprised of attorneys, engineers, and then they work together to help business units comply with open source, understand licenses, interpret licenses, advise businesses on license usage, and also a significant portion of OSPO's work is focused on strategy.
Okay, so let's get back to the interview and go with question number 2. How does it differ from closed source? Because we were talking about open source. So what are the main differences?
Yeah, I think one of the chief differences, key differentiators would be the pricing aspect, the budget. So like I mentioned before, I think the startups all have to be mindful about how much they're spending, because they have to make sure that they keep their budget tight and in control. So having said that, I think if they are spending a lot of money, you know, uh, buying proprietary code, then that makes that sort of inflates their budget. So I think that's when open source steps in and says, well, I think you can use this, and as opposed to using a closed source, because the open source is out there. You will have to comply with certain obligations, but then it's not really costing you anything.
And right now, in the legal aspect, do you think that founders understand legal compliance aspects? Because
Uh,
it's not really easy these aspects on open source, no?
yes, yes. So I mean, I so this is what I would say. So that area is still gray. I think one of the things that I often hear is that, well, open source is out there to use for free. Well, I think we have to understand the word free very carefully, and we cannot be, we should not get too encouraged with the word free, because it is out there for free. I mean, free usage, but then there are certain obligations that are tied to it. So I think if a startup was to use an open source library, or leverage an open source code that's out there, uh, I think it's important for them to understand the implications of usage. And I think the maturity at this point is low with startups. I mean, not many startups would understand this aspect, and they end up exposing themselves to significant amount of risk. So I think at build phase, it is imperative that the startups engage a consultant, and run their code through the consultant to understand what are the license implications, and sort of go with that. And they should divide up their build phase into certain phases, and work with the consultant to see if whether or not they have consumed any license or any product that's tainted. Because if it is, then they're exposing themselves to up for significant amount of risk. There could be a lot of revenue leakage at a later stage once the code is up and running.
Yeah, we have not so many problem in Spain with the free on free software, because we have two different words. So we have the word libre, and with this there is that makes a big difference, because in English speaking, free can mean two different things. So
Yes, absolutely. I think we have to just understand. It's important to just read the license. I mean, if one does not understand the license, I mean, then I would encourage them to push the founders to sort of hire a consultant who understands licenses, and then get it reviewed. So that would be my advice, because I think going too deep into a situation which you don't understand, it'll only be difficult to come back out.
And coming back with the funders, what is the level of compliance they need, and how do you determine that level with legal compliance, of course?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I mean, I think the level of compliance can only be determined uh, if the code itself is evaluated. And in order to evaluate the code, I think it's really important that the founders get the code scanned, get a report, get it reviewed by a consultant, And then that way, I think the consultant would be in a better position to, you know, would be in a better position to basically advise the founders as to where they're going wrong, or what are the interactions that are in the code base that are potentially problematic. So I think once that review is done, that is when I think the level of compliance can be determined, because it really goes hand in hand with the maturity of the developer. So the more mature the developer is, the lower the lower the level of compliance will be. But and vice versa.
And what are the typical errors made by founder on these aspects? Have you got a list of with your experience of the typical errors done by
Yeah, I think
founder?
sure. That's a good question. I think the typical errors would be using a very strong license that sort of discourages commercial use, and using a strong license like that in a commercial in a code that you are trying to commercialize. So and you're simply doing it because you do not understand the license and you do not understand the implications. So like I said before, I think that what eventually happens is then you end up exposing yourself. So I think one of the common mistakes is using a library that has a very strong license attached, which discourages commercialization. That'll be one of the best examples.
Thank you very much. Right now, we have a question from the audience. You want to answer it right now, or we'll let it for the end of the interview? What do you prefer?
Oh, sure. I can go for it now.
Okay, perfect. So it's a question from Gurbet Sidhu. Sorry, I don't know if I say well the name.
Oh, actually, I know Gurbir very well. So
Okay. So the question is, what are your views on open source license compliant toolkits like Fossology?
I think Fossology is a good tool. I would not say I would not say it's the best tool that's out there, but it really depends on how much money you want to spend and what's founder's budget. So it really boils down to that. So you factor all these things in, and that's when I would pick a tool. But I think I think Fossology is good, and then there is Palameter is a good tool as well. And again, I think Black Duck is extremely popular with the developers.
Okay, thank you very much, Gurbe. If the question is okay, the answer is okay with you, or if you have another question, you can do it right now after this. Thank you very much. So I will go back with interview, and I want to ask you, what are the standard legal considerations?
Yeah, I think it's the legal considerations would be I think one would be to I think just read the license very well. I think read between the lines. Licenses can be very tricky, so I think it's important to understand, one is whether or not you can commercialize the library. It's very important, because if you're using an open source, it's very important to understand whether or not you can commercialize the library. Second, to what extent can you modify it, and if you're modifying it, what are the obligations tied to modifications? So these are the things that that's the second most important thing. And third, I would say is I think when you read the license, I mean, I think one should really focus on what are the restrictions, because there could be very specific restrictions to very generic restrictions. So I think it's important from a legal point of view to look at these three aspects and sort of really drill down into them and understand them and sort of relay it to the business.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question from the audience, but I will let it for the end because right now is my last question. Okay, from
Sure,
the internet.
sure.
Okay, thank you. So for you, well, how important is the compliance piece? Is my last question.
Oh yeah, I think I would on a scale of 5, I would say 5 out of 5, because I think because in today's day and age, I think technology is like it's the forefront of everything. I think I don't think we can do without technology, and I think every technology that we use, um, uh, well, it has open source. Open source is pervasive, is being widely used, and I think understanding compliance of open source becomes extremely important.
Okay, thank you very much. So right now I will go with the question from the audience. We have another question for you right now from Cosetta Massi. I hope that I say well the name. What are the procedures you suggest a company should implement internally as preventive measure, as opposed to checking the code down the line?
Yeah, so this is something that I addressed before, and I would suggest that if it really depends at what stage is the company in. I mean, uh, are you a company that's that has its solution in the market already, or if the solution's already in the market, then I think you have placed yourself in a fairly tricky position, as opposed to a solution that's not in the market yet, but you're still building it. It's still in build phase. So, well, in that case, I think the one of the most important things and step one would be to get your code base scanned and understand the report. Hire a consultant to review that report for you to address any ambiguities. So that would be as basic as that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this interview. And I don't know if you want to let your information to contact you directly through LinkedIn or email.
Oh, sure. Yes, absolutely. I think if there's someone out there who would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, they should just feel free to do so. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Well, I see uh, Manisha saying great job. So I know Manisha personally as well. So we are on the same committee. Thank you, Manisha. So
Thank you, thank you. Just go on, sorry.
yeah, so I think they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. They should feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And I think what I can do is I can leave my phone number here as well for you to share. Yeah, and I'm just happy to chat.
Okay, so I can share your phone number, sure?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, because it will stay on YouTube after this live, so it will be available for everyone.
Oh, sure, sure.
Okay. Perfect. Oh, and I put this here on screen if you have any questions. So thank you very much, Devrup, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks or in 2021 for Open Expo event or Open Expo Virtual Experience 2021.
Sure, I would.
So
I would love to come to Madrid.
I hope to see you next year, and
Sure, I think I lost you there.